The waiter's hand trembled as he passed me the note. It's 6 words unraveling my entire life. Your daughter just poisoned your drink, sir. I stared at the crisp linen paper, the elegant script looking so innocent yet carrying such a venomous message. My first instinct was denial. This must be some kind of terrible mistake, a cruel joke. But when I looked into the young man's eyes, I saw genuine fear staring back at me. His Adam's apple bobbed nervously as he swallowed, his knuckles white where he gripped his serving tray. This was no prank. This was a warning that would forever divide my life into before and after. Just 2 hours earlier, I had been Arthur Vance, celebrated entrepreneur, recently retired after selling my genetic research firm, Ether Innovations, for $75 million. The journey to this moment had begun 40 years ago in a cramped university laboratory, with myself and 2 other graduate students working tirelessly through nights, fueled by cheap coffee and grand dreams. We'd started with researching genetic markers for rare diseases, never imagining it would grow into one of the most respected biotech firms in the country. This dinner at Le Soleil, the city's most exclusive dining establishment, where reservations required booking 6 months in advance, was meant to be the crowning moment of my career. The perfect celebration with the only family I had left, my daughter Sophia and her husband Mark. I remembered watching them arrive at the restaurant earlier that evening. Sophia had worn the emerald green dress that brought out the flecks of gold in her eyes, the same eyes her mother had possessed. For a moment, seeing her walk toward me, I could almost pretend Eleanor was still with us. The pain of losing my wife to cancer 5 years ago still felt fresh some days, like a wound that had never properly healed. Sophia had been my rock through that terrible time, or so I had believed. The final confirmation call from my banker, Mr. Abernethy, came just as we were being seated at our prime table overlooking the city's glittering skyline. The Maître d' had personally escorted us to the best seat in the house, Table 7, with its breathtaking, panoramic view of the city lights, twinkling like scattered diamonds against the velvet night. I must take this, I'd said, offering them an apologetic smile. I remember the look they exchanged as I stood, what I had mistaken for shared excitement now revealed itself as something darker, more calculating. Stepping away into the grand, marble-floored foyer, I leaned against a cool pillar and listened to the words that should have been the start of a new, peaceful chapter in my life. The funds have been transferred, Mr. Vance, all $75 million. The wire cleared at precisely 7:32 p.m. Congratulations, sir. I remember the feeling, a profound, almost physical lightness, as if a weight I had carried for decades had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I was 68 years old, finally free from the relentless pressure of running a multinational corporation. I could travel to all those places Eleanor and I had dreamed of visiting, pursue meaningful philanthropy, finally live a life not dictated by board meetings and shareholder reports. But as I turned, buoyant with relief and eager to share the good news, the young server stepped into my path. He was pale, his hands shaking so violently the empty silver tray he carried rattled softly. "Sir, Mr. Vance, I'm so sorry to bother you," he stammered, his eyes darting around nervously as if expecting to be caught at any moment. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I couldn't just stand by and watch. He pressed the small, folded square of linen paper into my hand. I unfolded it, and my new life crumbled before it even began. My blood turned to ice. 40 years in the cutthroat world of biotech had honed my instincts for deception and corporate espionage. I had faced down hostile takeovers and unscrupulous competitors who would stop at nothing to steal our research. I could smell a lie from a mile away, detect insincerity in the most polished executive, and every fiber of my being screamed that this terrified young man was telling the terrifying, impossible truth. My own daughter, my Sophia. The pain was immediate and searing, a hot knife twisting in my gut. Memories flooded me, teaching her to ride a bicycle in our driveway, helping her with science fair projects, walking her down the aisle on her wedding day. How could the same hands that had once built Lego towers with me now be plotting my destruction? But just as quickly as the pain came, a survival switch flipped deep inside me. The grieving father was shoved into a locked room, and the CEO, the strategist, the cold, calculating survivor who had built an empire from nothing, took control. This was no longer about family. This was about survival. I looked into the waiter's eyes, my own gaze now steady and commanding. "What's your name?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. Ethan, sir," he stammered. "Ethan, look at me," I commanded, and his frightened eyes met mine. "Tell me exactly what you saw. Leave nothing out." He took a shaky breath. "I was refilling water glasses at the station behind your table. Your son-in-law," he pointed to that large abstract, painting on the far wall, "and asked your daughter a question about the artist. It felt staged, like he was making sure you were both looking away. The moment your backs were turned, your daughter, she was so fast, sir. She took a small brown glass vial from her clutch purse, unscrewed the cap, and poured a fine white powder into your wine glass. Then she swirled it once and put the vial back. It took maybe 3 seconds total." My heart hammered against my ribs. The detail was too specific to be fabricated. I reached into my wallet, pulled out a stack of bills. It must have been $500, and pressed it into his damp hand along with my private business card, the one without a title. "Ethan, you never saw me. You never gave me anything. You will finish your shift, go home, and never speak of this to anyone. But you should know you may have just saved my life. If you are ever in serious trouble, you call that number." He nodded, mute with fear, and melted back into the staff corridor like a ghost. I was alone again, the note clutched in my fist. I took 3 deep, steadying breaths, leaning against the cool marble wall for support. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I thought of Lavra, my late wife, and how she'd never trusted Mark from the beginning. "He looks at you like you're a winning lottery ticket. Arthur," she'd warned me years ago, her voice gentle but firm. "He doesn't love Sophia. He loves her last name. He loves what she represents," I had dismissed. Her concerns as maternal overprotectiveness. How I wished I could go back and listen to that wisdom now. I smoothed the front of my tailored jacket, fixed a relaxed, slightly distracted smile on my face, and walked back to my execution. Each step felt heavy, as if I were walking through water. The scene that greeted me was a perfect, sickening portrait of familial bliss. Sophia's laughter, once a sound that filled me with pure joy, now tinkled like broken crystal. "To the most brilliant man I know," Mark said, raising his glass of outrageously expensive Burgundy. His smile was wide, practiced, but it didn't reach his eyes. Their eyes, that was the tell. They held the cold, sharp calculation of predators who have finally cornered their prey after a long, patient hunt. I felt a fresh wave of nausea wash over me, the rich aromas of truffle and seared scallops suddenly turning cloying and oppressive. I took my seat, the plush velvet of the chair feeling like a bed of nails. "Just the accountants, you know how it is," I said with a practiced, dismissive wave, forcing a casual tone I didn't feel, dotting the final I's on the transfer. "Paperwork never ends. Even with a deal this size," as I spoke, my mind was racing. A supercomputer processing 1,000 data points at once, connecting dots I had previously ignored. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Their recent suffocating concern. "Father, you've seemed so distracted lately," Sophia had said just days ago, her voice dripping with fake worry as she visited me at home. "You completely forgot our lunch on Tuesday." I hadn't forgotten. They had canceled it via a text I later realized was suspiciously vague. And Mark, just last week, putting a patronizing hand on my shoulder. "Arthur, you're looking tired. The stress of this sale. Are you sure you're capable of handling the transition alone? These financial instruments can be complex." "I'd be happy to look everything over for you." They weren't just being attentive. They were meticulously, coldly constructing a narrative of my mental decline. They were laying the groundwork for what was to come, preparing the soil so that when I suddenly deteriorated, people would remember the signs. My eyes fell upon my wine glass. The deep red Cabernet swirled, pristine and undisturbed in the elegant crystal. It looked perfectly normal. But I knew better now. This wasn't about a quick, violent poison. That would be too messy, too traceable, inviting a police investigation and autopsy. No, this was something far more insidious. A complex compound designed not to kill, but to incapacitate. To induce confusion, slurred speech, maybe even seizures, symptoms that perfectly mimic a sudden, devastating stroke or rapid-onset dementia. The realization was chilling in its sophistication. They didn't want me dead. They wanted me declared mentally incompetent. A conservatorship would be filed, and with their evidence of my decline and a paid-off doctor, they would have me locked away in a facility while they gained control of everything. The $75 million, and more importantly, control of my company's assets and its immaculate international shipping logistics would fall seamlessly into their waiting hands. Mark's hands. I had to switch the glasses. I couldn't refuse to drink. That would tip them off and they would simply try again, perhaps more desperately next time. I had to make them believe their plan was working perfectly. I needed a moment of perfect distraction, a few seconds where all eyes were elsewhere. I waited, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my exterior remained calm. I made pleasant conversation, asking Mark about his latest business ventures, complimenting Sophia on her dress, all while watching, waiting for my moment. The opportunity came when a server leaned between Mark and me to offer a basket of still warm artisan bread. As he did, I accidentally jerked my elbow, sending my silver fork clattering loudly onto the marble floor. Oh, goodness. My clumsiness, I exclaimed, my voice pitched with just the right note of elderly frustration. This is what happens when you get to be my age. I bent down, disappearing for a crucial 3 seconds beneath the white linen tablecloth. In that tiny window, my hands moved with a speed and precision, born of a lifetime of making decisive moves under pressure. My right hand picked up my tainted glass. My left picked up Sophia's clean one. I moved them both out of the way of the imaginary spill, and when I set them back down, their positions were reversed. It was done? A profound quote from a book I'd once read echoed in my mind, its meaning now painfully clear. Trust is a mirror. Once shattered, it can never be made whole again. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. I moved food around my plate, forcing a few bites past the lump in my throat that felt the size of a golf ball. I listened to Mark drone on about a new import-export venture he was planning, no doubt with my capital. He spoke of markets in Eastern Europe, of streamlined logistics and customs clearance. The irony was a bitter pill. He was essentially describing how he planned to use my company's infrastructure for his own ends, right in front of me, confident I was too naive or senile to understand. And all the while, I watched my daughter. I studied the face I loved more than anything in the world, searching for a hint of remorse, a flicker of the child. I knew, the little girl who used to climb into my lap with her favorite storybook. I saw nothing but a polished, greedy stranger who shared her features. It began subtly, just as I knew it would. A slight, almost imperceptible slur crept into her speech midway, through a sentence about the restaurant's decor. Mark, the room? It feels strange. Are the lights flickering? She blinked several times, slowly, as if trying to clear her vision. Mark, engrossed in his own grandiose plans for my money, initially brushed her off. It's the ambiance, darling. It's supposed to be dramatic. That's why we picked this place. But then her words thickened, losing their cohesion like syrup poured in winter. I feel dizzy, Mark. I really don't feel well at all. Her attempt to stand was clumsy, uncoordinated, her movements becoming jerky and uncertain. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor, a screech that cut through the restaurant's polite hum and drew stares from neighboring tables. Then her eyes rolled back into her head, showing only the whites, and her body went completely limp, collapsing to the floor with a dull, sickening thud that I knew I would hear in my nightmares. Her arms and legs began to twitch in a small, horrifying seizure. Mark's face was a canvas of pure, unadulterated panic. not the panic of a man seeing his wife in mortal danger, but the sheer, logistical terror of an accomplice watching a perfect plan explode in his face. He was frozen, staring at her, then at me, his mind unable to process this catastrophic failure. He wasn't rushing to her side. He was calculating, trying to figure out how this could have happened, how their careful scheme had gone so terribly wrong. "Sophia!" I cried out, launching into my own performance. I infused my voice with a perfect, cracking symphony of fatherly terror. I shoved my chair back, the sound echoing through the now silent restaurant. "My God, help. Somebody, please, help my daughter. She's not breathing right." I rushed to her side, kneeling on the cold marble, grabbing her limp, cold hand, all while watching Mark from the corner of my eye. He was still, statue still, a deer in the headlights of his own making, his mind clearly reeling. The restaurant descended into a stunned, then chaotic, silence. A manager appeared, his face a mask of professional concern, phone already pressed to his ear. Patrons at nearby tables stared, some half rising from their seats, others looking away in uncomfortable silence. Paramedics were called, their arrival a blur of efficient motion and crackling radios. As they loaded my unconscious daughter onto a gurney, carefully strapping her in, Mark finally snapped out of his stupor. He grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice, his fingers digging into my bicep with surprising strength. He pulled me close, his voice a venomous, low whisper meant only for me. The smell of wine and his expensive cologne was suffocating. "What did you do, you old fool?" he hissed, his eyes burning with a hatred I now saw had always been there, simmering beneath the surface of his charming facade. I met his gaze and I let him see what he wanted to see, the wide, watery eyes of a confused and terrified old man. My voice trembled, a masterclass in feigned weakness and confusion. "Me, son?" I whispered back, my heart hammering not with fear, but with a cold, victorious rage. What was in her glass? The emergency room at St. Catherine's was a jarring universe of controlled chaos after the opulent calm of La Soleil. Harsh fluorescent lights replaced the restaurant's warm, golden glow. The smell of antiseptic and stale coffee overpowered the delicate sense of truffles and perfume. The air hummed with beeping monitors and hurried conversations. Dr. Evans, the young resident on duty, was sharp, efficient, and thankfully not the corrupt Dr. Silas Reed they had in their pocket. He took one look at Sophia's vitals and her neurological symptoms and immediately ordered a full toxicology screen. Mark, however, was frantic, trying to steer the narrative away from drugs and toward a medical anomaly. "It's a shellfish allergy, a severe anaphylactic reaction." He insisted, his voice rising with a desperation that was entirely about controlling the diagnosis, not saving his wife. She must have eaten a contaminated scallop. "Just give her an EpiPen and she'd be fine." He was creating a paper trail, a false explanation that would later support their story of my instability. Dr. Evans wasn't buying it. "Mr. Ford, her airways are clear. There's no swelling, no urticaria. This isn't anaphylaxis. These are neurological symptoms. I'm ordering a full workup tox screen. CBC head CT?" He was professional but firm, and I could see the panic growing in Mark's eyes as his control over the situation slipped away. While Mark was entangled in a heated, circular argument with Dr. Evans about medical protocols, I saw my chance. I slipped away from the bustling trauma bay, the institutional green walls seeming to close in on me. The clock in the hallway read 10:47 p.m. I had a more pressing appointment to keep, one that would decide the outcome of this war they had started. I hailed a cab outside the hospital's bright emergency entrance. The night air was cool against my skin. 47 Willow Lane, I instructed the driver, giving him my daughter's address, not my own. The house they lived in, a stark, modern monstrosity of glass and steel, was a testament to the life they craved but couldn't afford on Mark's questionable business income. I knew they kept a spare key buried in the dry soil of a large, neglected potted fern by the back patio. Their arrogance was their weakness. They never believed I was a threat, never imagined I would be the one investigating them. Letting myself into the silent, dark house felt like crossing a Rubicon. There was no going back from this. The air was still, smelling of new leather and lemony cleaning products. It felt like a showroom, not a home, everything perfectly positioned, devoid of the comfortable clutter of real life. I didn't turn on the main lights, using only the glow from my phone to navigate. I went straight to Sophia's home office, a sterile white space dominated by a sleek, minimalized desk that looked more like a sculpture than functional furniture. Her laptop was there, lid closed. I opened it. The screen lit up asking for a password. I tried her mother's birthday. Access denied. I tried the date of our last family vacation. Together, nothing. Then I tried the word trust. The screen unlocked immediately. The irony was so bitter I almost laughed aloud. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the click-clack sound unnaturally loud in the profound silence. A search for Dr. Silas Reed brought up the entire, damning email chain instantly. The subject line made my blood run cold. The Vance transition. I read them, each word carving a deeper hole in my soul. Each sentence another nail in the coffin of our relationship. The emails were a detailed blueprint of my destruction. Reed confirmed the provision of a powerful, fast-acting psychotropic drug, advising on the precise dosage to induce acute psychotic, confusion and stroke-like symptoms within 20 minutes of ingestion. Sophia's email was the most painful to read. I'll do it at the celebration dinner. He trusts me completely. He'll never suspect. Once he's showing symptoms, we'll take him to the hospital and you can take over his care. And then I saw the final piece, an email from a law firm, sent just yesterday with an attachment. I clicked it open. It was an emergency petition for conservatorship of Arthur Vance. The reasons listed were a carbon copy of their recent comments to me, financial irresponsibility, paranoia, severe memory loss, a danger to himself and his estate. The hearing was scheduled for 8:00 a.m. this very morning. In courtroom 4A, they planned to have me declared incompetent before I even had a chance to understand what was happening to me. But it was Mark's emails that revealed the true monstrous scope of their plan. It wasn't just about the $75 million. He had been using my company's pristine, federally approved international shipping lanes, the ones we used for sensitive, temperature-controlled biological samples, to move his own contraband. The emails mentioned special containers and customs pre-clearance. Advantages: the sale of Ether Innovations would trigger a mandatory, top-to-bottom federal audit of all assets and operations. My company's flawless shipping records would be scrutinized by forensic accountants, and his illicit operation would be exposed, bringing down not just him, but potentially implicating the company I had spent my life building. This conservatorship was a desperate, last-ditch bid to seize control of the company before the sale was fully finalized, to bury the evidence and escape justice. I sat back in her chair, the full horror washing over me. I forwarded the entire chain to my lawyer, Atticus Thorne, with a 2-word message: "It's war." Another truth settled over me, colder and darker than the first. The darkest betrayals are not plotted by enemies, but whispered by family. Atticus Thorne met me at his penthouse office at 5 a.m. The city spread out below, used like a sleeping giant, lights twinkling in the pre-dawn darkness. He was already in a crisp white shirt and tie, a pot of strong black coffee brewing on the sideboard. He was not a family lawyer. He was a corporate shark, a litigator who had dismantled Fortune 500 companies with a single devastating cross-examination. I laid it all out for him. The CEO delivering a battlefield report, the waiter's warning, the switched glasses, Sophia's collapse, the damning emails. I showed him the printed copies. He listened, his face an impassive mask, his fingers steepled, taking in every detail without visible reaction. When I finished, he was silent for a full minute, processing. Then he spoke, his voice low and precise. "This is conspiracy to commit assault, fraud, bribery of a medical professional, and based on these shipping mentions, likely federal crimes. The conservatorship hearing is their battlefield. We'll meet them there." As we reviewed the strategy, my phone rang. It was Mark, His voice was slick with a syrupy, fake concern that made my skin crawl. "Father, where are you?" "I've been worried sick, Dr. Reed. Is on his way to your house, right? Now to check on you? After the shock of tonight, you seem unwell." The trap was being set. They would have their doctor find me alone, confused and agitated, providing the evidence needed for the hearing in just a few hours. I performed my role one last time for him, letting my voice tremble and break, layering it with a paranoid fear. I don't need a doctor, Mark. I'm fine. Just tired. All this excitement. "Just go home, Father," he insisted, his voice hardening with a subtle threat. "Let him help you." "For me, for Sophia." "We're all so worried about you," I agreed. The picture of a defeated, scared old man. Okay, son. I'll go home. I need to rest." I hung up and looked at Thorne. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. It was the most terrifying and reassuring thing I had ever seen. "Let them wait at an empty house," he said, closing his briefcase with a definitive click. "Let Dr. Reed ring the doorbell and wonder where his confused patient has wandered off to. Let them panic. We have a different appointment to keep." At 7:55 a.m., we stood in the stark, linoleum-floored hallway outside. Courtroom 4A, the air smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Through the small wired window in the door, I saw them. Mark, pacing in his best suit, looking haggard and frayed, the pressure of the last 12 hours evident in the dark circles under his eyes. His Lawyer, a man with overly gelled hair and a cheap, shiny suit that screamed ambulance chaser. And Dr. Silas Reed sitting on a hard wooden bench, dabbing sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief, his hands shaking visibly even from this distance. We listened as the hearing began. Mark's Lawyer, a Mr. Jennings, addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we are here under the most tragic of circumstances," he began, his voice oozing false sympathy. He painted a vivid picture of a mentally decaying old man, a danger to himself and his fortune. He described my violent, paranoid outburst at the restaurant, my bizarre behavior, and my subsequent flight into the night. "He is missing, Your Honor. We fear he is wandering the streets, confused and vulnerable, with access to $75 million. We must secure his assets and his person immediately to protect him from himself." They called Dr. Reed to the stand. Under oath, he perjured himself, describing in clinical detail my severe cognitive decline, my paranoia about family members, my inability to manage basic financial affairs. He stated he had tried to see me this very morning for an emergency evaluation, but I was gone, my house empty. The final proof of my instability and the urgency of their petition. Then Thorne stood. His voice, a low rumble of absolute authority, cut through the stuffy room. "Your Honor, if I may interject?" He proceeded to systematically, mercilessly dismantle their entire world. He introduced the emails, displaying them on a large screen for the court to see. He revealed the financial records showing regular payments from Mark Shell Corporation to Reed's offshore account, highlighting the doctor's massive, crippling gambling debts that made him susceptible to bribery. He exposed the entire Vance transition conspiracy in brutal, undeniable detail. Reed, under Thorne's brutal, precise cross-examination, completely shattered. The confident medical expert became a stammering, sweating mess. "Is it standard medical practice to prescribe powerful psychotropics for a patient you've never formally examined, doctor?" Thorne asked, his tone deceptively mild. "And is a $300,000 consulting fee your usual rate?" Reed broke down, sobbing on the stand, confessing to everything, begging for mercy, implicating Mark as the mastermind. Mark watched his entire scheme unravel in a matter of minutes. The color drained from his face, leaving a waxy, ghastly pallor. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the raw, primal fear of a cornered animal who knows the walls are closing in. When the judge fixed him with a steely gaze and said, "Mr. Ford, you have some very serious questions to answer," that was the final straw. With a guttural roar of pure, impotent rage, he vaulted over the table, his hands clawed, aiming for my throat. "I'll kill you, you old bastard." He screamed, his face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. He never reached me. 2 men in the back row, FBI agents. Thorne had quietly invited to observe the testimony regarding the federal violations, moved with terrifying speed and efficiency, tackling him to the ground and slapping handcuffs on his wrists. The courtroom erupted in gasps and shouts. The judge slammed his gavel, his calls for order barely audible over the chaos. Mark was formally arrested for conspiracy, fraud, bribery, and smuggling, his screams of rage echoing down the hallway as he was dragged away, his expensive suit rumpled and his carefully constructed life in ruins. I visited Sophia in the psychiatric ward later that day. The TV in the corner of her sterile room was showing news footage of Mark's arrest, the Chiron-reading biotech heir arrested in conspiracy. Against father, she looked small and broken in the standard-issue hospital gown, her face pale and blotchy from crying, her usually perfect hair a tangled mess. She looked up as I entered, her eyes wide with a new, profound terror, the terror of someone who has lost everything and knows it. "Dad, I didn't know. He made me. He said it was the only way. He said you were losing your mind and we had to protect the company." She wept, the lies now a pathetic, reflexive shield against a truth too horrible to face. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no fatherly urge to comfort her. Just a vast, hollow emptiness where my love for her had once lived, a chamber of my heart now dark and silent. I stood by the window, looking down at the people moving on the streets below, their lives continuing normally, unaware of the earthquake that had shattered mine. I laid out her new reality, my voice calm and devoid of emotion, as if I were discussing a business restructuring. I would use my considerable wealth and influence to keep her out of prison, negotiating a plea deal that acknowledged her coercion by Mark. I would place her in a long-term, strict rehabilitation facility, not for addiction, but for her corrupted character. She would undergo years of intensive therapy to learn about accountability, ethics, and the consequences of choices. She would be evaluated by independent psychologists I selected, but she would inherit nothing. Not a single cent of the $75 million, nor any future assets, would ever bear her name. The safety net she had taken for granted her entire life was gone permanently. She would have to work. For the first time in her 35 years, she would learn the actual value of a dollar she herself had earned through sweat and effort, not manipulation and betrayal. And her first job was already arranged. She would be working the night shift, performing sanitation duties at a homeless shelter my foundation funded. She would scrub floors, clean bathrooms, and take out trash, surrounded by people who had lost everything through circumstance and misfortune, not through monstrous, calculated choice. She would see real struggle, real consequence every single night. Some might call this punishment cruel, excessive for a first-time offender who was likely manipulated. I call it the only lesson I had left to teach. It was the only path that offered, a sliver of hope that the woman who emerged on the other side of this hard, humble work might, one day, resemble the daughter I once knew and loved. Redemption, if it ever came, would not be found in comfort or privilege, but in the honest sweat of difficult labor and the quiet humility of serving those she once would have ignored. If you believe that the deepest wounds are inflicted by those we love most, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story made you question who you can truly trust, please like this video and subscribe to Wines of Thought for more tales of justice and consequence.